There are books that were never meant to survive. Texts buried in vaults, sealed behind stone, erased from history. And yet, one of them still exists, the Book of Jubilees. Tonight, we open it. It did not appear in a time of peace. The Book of Jubilees emerged around 150 years before Christ, when Judea was under foreign control. Greek rulers pressed their language, their customs, their gods onto a people already fighting to survive. And in that pressure, someone rewrote history, not from memory, but from revelation. Jubilees claims that while Moses stood on Mount Sinai, an angel dictated a hidden version of Genesis, a version structured in precise cycles of 49 years, a version insisting the law existed before creation itself. This was not commentary. It was correction. It reshaped the timeline of the world. It intensified purity laws. It sharpened boundaries between Jew and Gentile. And it circulated in Hebrew, long before Greek translations spread across the region. Centuries later, fragments of it would be discovered in caves near Qumran, hidden among what we now call the Dead Sea Scrolls, meaning one community did not treat it as fringe. They treated it as truth. The Book of Jubilees did not survive by accident. It survived because one community refused to let it disappear. By the 1st century before Christ, a disciplined Jewish sect withdrew into the desert near the Dead Sea. They believed Jerusalem's priesthood had become illegitimate. They believed the temple calendar was corrupt. They believed the covenant itself was being mishandled. So they separated. They built a structured community at Qumran. Ritual washings, shared property, strict hierarchy, absolute obedience to law. And at the center of their theology was sacred time, not the lunar calendar used in Jerusalem, but a solar calendar, a calendar that matched the system laid out in the Book of Jubilees. This was not coincidence. Jubilees reinforced their worldview. It validated their separation. It justified their calendar. It sharpened their boundaries against outsiders, which is why they copied it repeatedly. Fragments of Jubilees were found in multiple Qumran caves, more than many other non-biblical works, meaning this was not fringe reading material. It was authoritative within their community. When they sealed scrolls inside clay jars, they chose what deserved preservation, and Jubilees made that cut. Without Qumran, this book may have vanished entirely. In the year 70, Rome destroyed Jerusalem. The temple burned, the priesthood collapsed, and the world that produced Qumran disappeared. The desert sect did not survive the war. Their caves were abandoned, their scrolls were sealed, and leadership shifted. Out of the ashes, a new center of authority emerged: Rabbinic Judaism. No temple, no sacrificial system, but law, interpretation, oral tradition. And as communities rebuilt, texts had to be clarified. Which books defined Israel's story? Which carried binding authority? Which aligned with the theological direction of survival? The Book of Jubilees, with its rigid solar calendar, its intensified purity codes, its sectarian edge, did not fit cleanly into the emerging rabbinic framework. It was not quoted in the Mishnah. It did not anchor rabbinic argument. And slowly, it drifted outside the boundaries of canon. Not violently removed, not publicly condemned, but simply not carried forward. As Christianity began to spread, it inherited Israel's scriptures. But it did not inherit them untouched. The early church read Genesis, Exodus, the prophets. But when leaders began clarifying authoritative writings, the Book of Jubilees was not elevated. Some early Christian thinkers were aware of it. Certain themes echoed through other texts: angelic mediation, structured sacred time, expanded Genesis narratives. But by the 4th century, as councils debated canon, the Church gravitated toward texts widely circulated in Greek. Jubilees had primarily circulated in Hebrew. Its influence was regional. Its calendar system diverged from dominant Christian theology, and its strict legal intensifications did not align with emerging Christian emphasis on grace. So once again, it was not violently condemned. It was simply not carried into the developing canon. But the Book of Jubilees did not disappear. It traveled. Long before European Christianity formalized its canon, Christian communities were already thriving in the Horn of Africa. By the 4th century, the Kingdom of Axum had embraced Christianity, not as an extension of Rome, but as its own ancient expression of faith. The Ethiopian Church developed along a different line of transmission, closer to older Semitic traditions, preserving texts in the Ge'ez language. And within that canon, the Book of Jubilees was never removed. It was never labeled apocryphal. It was never treated as fringe. It was scripture, copied by hand for centuries, guarded in monasteries carved into mountains, read in liturgy, taught as sacred history. Which means, while Western Christianity narrowed its canon, Ethiopia carried a broader one. And when modern scholars in the 19th century sought a complete version of Jubilees, they did not find it in Rome. They did not find it in Jerusalem. They found it in Ethiopia. Without that preservation, we would know the book only in fragments from the Dead Sea caves. Instead, it survived in full. Canon is not formed in a vacuum. It is shaped by survival, by geography, by language, by who holds authority when the dust settles. When Jerusalem burned, power shifted. When Rome rose, texts moved through Greek hands. When councils clarified doctrine, boundaries narrowed. And what did not align was simply not carried forward. The Book of Jubilees was not erased in outrage. It was not denounced in thunder. It was left behind by traditions moving in different directions. Yet, far from the centers of imperial theology, in the highlands of Ethiopia, a different current continued. There, the book was copied, read, guarded, preserved. Which means the question is not, why was it banned? But rather, why did some carry it while others did not? Authority decides what is central. Geography decides what survives. And preservation quietly defies disappearance. This was not a story of destruction. It was a story of divergence, of lines splitting, of traditions narrowing while others widened. And somewhere between Rome, Jerusalem, Qumran, and Axum, a book continued breathing, not lost, not dominant, but enduring. This is the Quiet Files.